Oh my goodness, you guys. Just trying to make sure I'm looking good because you know what, bitch? It is Halloween. I am so excited. If I keep looking down, I'm so sorry. I'm getting distracted because I'm doing a new kind of filming setup. So this is going to be a little bit different from how I've been doing this in the past. I have a lot to say, so we need to get straight into this. I feel like this is going to be a longer video, but you know what? That's okay. It's allowed to be I'm allowed a longer video as a treat. So in the past on this channel, we've talked about a lot of different topics when it comes to this show. We've talked about gay religious trauma. We have talked about symbolism and color theory and how it all kind of plays into each other. But I'm afraid we've now come to the portion of the program where we have to talk a little bit about desperation. Recently, it was revealed at Ineffable Con, which, first of all, why am I just hearing about this now? I would really love to go to that. I think that'd be so much fun. But anyway, it was revealed at Ineffable Con that by one of the I think executive producers, I believe Rob Wilkins. I will put a correction here if it's not him, or if it is him, I'll just put the tweet in that I kind of saw about this. His whole thing was that in the kiss scene, Aziraphale's face in the immediate aftermath of the kiss is like shock that it's happening, but also like him asking without asking Crowley to do it again. And so naturally, hearing that, like, just broke everything in my chilly little heart. And I realized I have to make this video. I have to make this video. I have to talk about this. I have no choice. I am bound by the laws of Good Omens queer media creator. Like, I have to do it. I talk about shit on here all the time. So, like, this was inevitable. I'm devastated by it, but I have to talk about it. So let's get into this. Obviously, I think it goes without saying that this is going to be a very spoiler-heavy episode. I'm trying to, as much as possible, include not necessarily clips, but like GIFs and pictures of things, just to kind of give more context, make it a little more, video essay-like. I used to do video essays all the time. I miss that, like, concept. So we'll see how this goes. I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that I don't get like any content thing from Amazon or anything like that. Like, please just be cool, Prime. I know that's asking for a lot, but like, please be cool. So, and look, all I gotta say is strap in, because I have got a lot to say. So before I get started with this video, I do want to say thank you to everyone who has previously subscribed to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Narcissa DeVille. I make weekly Good Omens videos every Tuesday. Starting next month though, like actually my next video, I'm going to start doing 2 videos a week. So I'm very excited about that. That's going to be every other week is going to be 2 videos because we're doing a review of the actual show itself. But I wanted to keep still doing videos like this. So Tuesday will be the regular videos, which is going to be the review videos. And then on Thursday, I believe I've decided, either Thursday or Friday, I think it's going to depend, every other Thursday or Friday, I will be uploading a secondary video that's going to be more along the lines of something like this, where it's not just a review, it's just kind of like a topic, because I've got plenty of topics like this. So I figured, fuck it, you know what, let's keep going, keep up the momentum. It's into the holiday season. This feels like the perfect time. So yeah. So the end of season 2 is probably the most contentious 15 minutes of film I feel like ever. I don't know, maybe I'm like being overdramatic about that, but it's something that has been like talked about, scrutinized, posts have been made, like a lot of people have had a lot of thoughts about this last 15 minutes of footage. So naturally, I feel like I have to throw my hat into the ring. Obviously, this is going to be something that when I do, when we get to season 2, the review, like this is all going to be kind of rehashed. I'm still going to talk about it, but I have to talk about this specifically now because it's in my head and it's going to drive me nuts if I don't. So you get to come on this journey with me. And there's a lot that happens in this like last 10 to 15-ish minutes of the scene. So I want to kind of break it down. And like I said, the whole thing about it being contentious is like, it's contentious for different reasons depending on who you ask. I would argue that most people kind of all have the same opinion that it's the most heart-wrenching end of a season cliffhanger that could ever exist. And it's also kind of a frustrating one. And like the more you watch it and the more you uncover, it just gets more heart-wrenching. Like I talked about this in a different video, that I couldn't believe that I didn't realize that Aziraphale almost says I love you. And like once I realized that, I was like, got it. Like I was gutted by this realization. Like I cannot go on. So I feel like the more you watch it and the more you like uncover these things, the more it's like, why? So naturally, this is going to be a fun little breakdown. No pun intended. Hopefully not really though. LOL. I hate that I did that. I hate that I did that. I will say one of the things that makes it so heart-wrenching is like the fact that it's really the moment, this last 15 minutes, where everything has really come to a head. Like, it really feels like that moment where it almost could have ended very similar to the ending of season 1, in terms of like, the day has been saved, Gabriel and Beelzebub have kind of confessed their own feelings, they've gone off together, which, let me just tell you, I have a lot of thoughts about this particular part of it. I don't know if that technically counts as the last 15 minutes. I'll leave you to decide like where in the timeline this all fits. But it is the most frustrating thing to me, and I continue to say this, that I kind of hate Beelzebub and Gabriel for the way they just fucked off into the middle of nothing and left Aziraphale with the fucking drama. After he, took care of Gabriel the entire time, but B, was like, why don't you ask them what they want? And it's like, oh, what we want is to apparently make your life miserable. And it's just like, why are you like this? Why? Like, follow your bliss, whatever. I'm all for that. But I also feel like, baby, you are like making someone else miserable with your actions. What are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here? It's just so devastating. Okay, anyway, I'm not going to get down that path. I'm not going to get down that path because that is almost its own video. And I've talked about this in several videos now. So I feel like I can't get bogged down with this, or this video is going to be 2 hours long. And I'm not Jenny Nicholson yet. I can't pull that shit off. I'm just not that girl. People will not watch that. Some people probably will, but most people will not from me. Which is fine. I'm okay with that. Maybe one day down the line. But right now, I'm not that girl. So it's okay. We're not going to do a 2-hour video. Probably. And another thing that kind of makes this like so devastating to me is like, after Beelzebub and Gabriel fuck off and Aziraphale goes with the Metatron, you know, a lot of people have talked about this scene, right? This particular scene where Aziraphale kind of turns to Crowley when the Metatron asks, like, hey, let's go for a walk. And a lot of people kind of feel like Aziraphale was trying to say without words, like, don't let me go. I don't trust him. But for some reason, he, you know, obviously he can't just say that. Even though technically, I don't think the Metatron was ever his, like, direct boss. But it's like, he can't say that because he's kind of the interim person who took over now that Gabriel's gone. And he seems to at least have been Gabriel's superior. That requires so much, like, having to go over the presumed hierarchy in heaven in the world of Good Omens, and I don't have that kind of strength. But it seems like he, you know, he couldn't just say that. He couldn't just say, like, don't let him take me, basically, which is kind of how it feels. And that's how a lot of people took it. It's like, he's giving Crowley this look of like, don't let me go. This isn't gonna end well. And spoiler alert, that was correct. I don't know if I think or agree that that is what Aziraphale was kind of saying with his eyes there. I guess I don't really know, but like in my head, I don't know. And I also, for a second though, I would like to talk about the fact that I do think Crowley saying, just go with him. What's the worst that could happen? Or like, you know, it can't get any weirder. I feel like that's a really weird, almost like out of character thing for Crowley to do. Like, why wouldn't he want to come along? Like, why would he trust the Metatron or anyone in heaven? Especially, he just watched the Metatron make very clear that of like what was going to happen to Gabriel and what he wanted to see for like the end of the world. So like, why would you just trust him now to go away with your angel? Like, I'm so confused. And then to add insult to injury, I know this is probably getting ahead of myself, but Neil recently said, or I guess maybe said, I don't know when, I didn't see the post. I've seen someone else talk about this fact, that Neil said technically the end of, like, in the last episode, both Aziraphale and Crowley were like coming to like confess their feelings at the same time. But of course that got, thrown into the fucking fire because of the Metatron. And I'm like, oh, it's like it just, every time I think I'm going to be okay, every time I think like, it's okay, it's over, we will get a resolution soon, it's going to be fine. It's like this new piece of information that's just like, hey, in case you didn't get stabbed in the heart enough, let me twist that knife and add a little lemon juice for you. It's like, why are you like this? It's so awful. So Crowley, for whatever reason, we'll never really know, maybe until next year. For whatever reason, he's like, okay, just go with him. Like, it can't get any weirder. Famous last words, very clearly. And so Aziraphale leaves, and Crowley is like, okay, I'm going to put the shop back to normal for Aziraphale, because Crowley is what? Acts of service. That is his love language. We've seen it 1,000 times now, and I don't think Aziraphale minds one single bit. He even says, rescuing me makes him so happy. So, like, clearly he knows what it is. It's all good. So he gets everything together, and he even like says, after all this, we need some us time. We need to be alone together, have a breakfast at the Ritz. For him, that's drinking. For Aziraphale, that's eating his weight in crepes, which is great. Love that for him. And it's, it is kind of like a semi-funny moment, because of course Muriel, who's kind of clueless, is like, oh great, we can all have breakfast together. And Crowley's like, yeah, no, when I mean us time, I mean not you. Sorry about it, but like, you are not invited to this. Clearly it's a date. And then we get the moment where Nina and Maggie are having a conversation in the coffee shop, in which we don't see the whole conversation, but it's kind of implied that they're like, we need to talk to them because they were meddling into our lives, but also clearly they're not seeing, like, they're not making the connections that this is them. They're like trying to meddle in their own lives. And I do think that's very interesting. Like, it's very clear that for Aziraphale, him setting up that ball is like him, he's messing into these humans' lives, but it's kind of like metaphorical, subtextual. He's trying to, mess with his own life, but he can't. So he's just kind of like, I'm just gonna mess with these people's lives, and hopefully that works out for me. Spoiler alert, it does not. But anyway, they leave the coffee shop. They go to see Crowley to have a little heart-to-heart with him. I do love how Nina just very gruffly is like, where's the other one? I'm like, oh my God. It's so funny to me. Nina is like one of my favorite characters. Her and Mrs. Sandwich, I really hope we get to see both of them next season, because I just think they're such fun characters. Well, and obviously Maggie too, but that goes without saying, because I don't think you can have Nina without Maggie. It's kind of like Crowley and Aziraphale. You cannot separate these two for very long. So they come over, they sit with Crowley. They're like, look, we need to have a talk. First of all, you're meddling into our lives, and that's not okay. But second of all, you clearly don't see what everyone else around you sees. So, like, we need to have a talk about that. And it's interesting because it makes it seem like that particular conversation is what kind of clues Crowley into his feelings. But I also feel like, again, because it's like intercut with a little bit of the conversation with Aziraphale and the Metatron, there's things that we're not seeing. Like, there's clearly things that need to be expounded upon. Like, I don't know how that particular conversation made him realize things more than the conversation with Nina that he had earlier, in which she said the whole other people's love lives thing, where he clearly was like, you can see the cogs turning. I will say too, I wonder how much different this scene would have been, or this whole like season would have ended had a lot of things gone differently, right? Like if Aziraphale had been there to have the conversation with Nina and Maggie, would it have made a difference? I feel like it would have had to have. If Crowley had gone with Aziraphale when all of this shit went down with the Metatron, I feel like that would have made a huge difference too. Obviously, and you know what? Maybe the reason he doesn't go with them is like the Metatron does something, because like, and I've talked about this before in another video, I don't remember which one, but like when the Metatron like turns around after Aziraphale walks out of the bookshop, he gives Crowley this look, and we never see a reaction from Crowley, but he like glares at him, and we never get any resolution to that. We never get like any reaction from Crowley. So I'm very curious like what was going on there. And they even, like I said, they play that like sinister kind of music to that look too, so it's like very clear that something is up with the Metatron, like something is not correct here. And it kind of makes me wonder, is that why Crowley was just kind of like waving him off? I don't know. Something is suspicious there. And it's not just because like everyone always says like, obviously something was wrong with the coffee cup. The Metatron did something. He clearly manipulated Aziraphale. But I also feel like he clearly did something to Crowley too, because it doesn't make sense that Crowley would just kind of sit there and be like, yeah, whatever, just go with him. What's the worst that could happen? But it also doesn't make sense that after he like glares at him and looks all angry and shit, that Crowley just has no reaction and doesn't like see a problem with that, and doesn't like, something's up there. I feel like there's something missing, and obviously, hopefully season 3 will kind of fix all, like explain all of that, but until then I just have my own thoughts and all of Tumblr's thoughts to like make me go up, climb the walls, basically. Then of course Nina and Maggie leave. They're like, I bet you guys have a lot to talk about. Aziraphale comes back when they have, obviously that's who they say it to. And I have a lot of thoughts about this particular part of the last 15 or last 10, whatever the math ends up as. I have a lot of thoughts about this, right? Because Crowley starts to, make his confession about how he feels. Aziraphale stops him, which is like, girl, please don't. But he stops him and he, says, hold that thought. I've got good news for you. And it's interesting, and what's a little bit confusing for me, and again, it's one of those situations where there is bits and pieces of this missing. There's so much of this scene that, like, even though it's 15 minutes long, there's so much missing. It feels like it should have been like the whole episode, to be honest, because there's so much missing from this. And one of the big things that's missing from this is at one point before the Metatron before they separate and the Metatron tells him like, hey, because Aziraphale's like, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to feel about this, and the Metatron's like, you can think about it. And then the next minute he's like, well, go tell your friend the good news. And it's like, okay, but you just said he could think about it, and now he has to have made a decision and tell this person that he's been with for like 6,000 years, hey, by the way, this is what's on offer. I'm so confused by that. I'm so confused about how he went from, you can take as much time as you need to think about this, and then it's like, go tell him now, you've made your decision. And I'm like, wait, what are we missing here? And obviously, like, I get it. It's a cliffhanger. It has to be there for a reason. It's infuriating. And I will say, like, the whole scene between Aziraphale and Crowley here, where Crowley clearly, has this thing that he needs to get out, and he wants so badly to get it out. And Aziraphale is just like, yeah, hold that thought. Here's the thing. We can go to heaven together and be angels, and I can be the Supreme Archangel and take over Gabriel's job. And Crowley's just like, what? That doesn't sound right. And he's right. It doesn't sound right. That does not make sense. And especially because, like, Aziraphale does clearly say that he doesn't want to go back to heaven. He doesn't want to take the job. He does not want to be the replacement. But clearly, again, there's something missing here. There's something we don't see. Because why would Aziraphale take that? Why would he take that job when he very clearly does not belong in heaven? And it's worth noting that, like, he has to know that Crowley, even if he could go to heaven, would never be accepted by the other angels. And quite frankly, and I've said this before, I cannot imagine there is not going to be an all out brawl in heaven when it comes to Michael and Uriel when they find out that their new boss is now Aziraphale, who, like, less than 4 years ago, they tried to have killed. So, like, what could possibly go wrong? Like, what? This is gonna be so chaotic. I cannot even wait. Not as chaotic as season 3 of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but like chaotic as fuck. I can guarantee you, and it's gonna be wild. The thing is, pretty much as soon as Aziraphale says, like, we can be angels again, come with me, everything just goes off the rails from there. Like, everything just goes off the rails. Crowley's like, are you kidding me? Like, please tell me you're joking. Please tell me this is a prank. I'm being punked. Please tell me this is not real and that you are smart enough to know this is not a good idea. I wish I could say that was the case. Oh, it pains me. Oh, it pains me. Physically pains me. And here's the thing. What makes it even more painful is, like, it's very clear, and this is why this video is what it is. This is why it's titled the way it is, because it's very, very clear that Crowley comes to the conclusion pretty quickly, like, this is not going the way I expected to, and in fact, this has gone entirely off the rails. I have to move quickly here because I have to do something big that's going to make Aziraphale realize, like, you do not belong in heaven. You belong here on earth with me. Do not do this. This is what you're going to be missing if you do this. And so first he tries to kind of say it with words. He tries to, like, make it clear, like, hey, we've always been able to count on each other. We've always been able to be there for each other. And it's a struggle because he doesn't really know how to, like, say his feelings. It's hard for him. You know, again, he's a demon. He wants to cling to that because he kind of needs it. And, you know, we do see him kind of struggle with that. And he does hint at, obviously, if Beelzebub and Gabriel could do it, if they can, you know, go off together and be a couple, then why can't we? And I feel like in his own way, Aziraphale does feel like what he's offering, despite what Crowley will later say. I do feel like for Aziraphale, he feels as though they're kind of like asking for the same thing, just in two different ways. And I think of the two of them, Aziraphale's is probably the least sensible. It's the least apt to work because he's asking a demon who was kicked out of heaven, who probably has undoubtedly a lot of pain and trauma associated with that. I made a whole video just last week about the pain and trauma of his fall. So, like, you have to assume that is something that is not easy for him. And he's asking him, like, hey, let's go back. We can, you know, he even says we can be together. It's very clear what his meaning is there. They're both trying to say the same thing, but because their communication styles just don't match up and they don't know how to communicate properly, because unfortunately it's not been safe to communicate properly and it's not been safe to be 100% honest and open, even though it's very clear that they trust each other. It's very clear that they have this deep connection, and that has to be based to some extent on, like, being able to communicate. There are things that they say without words, as it were, that they can communicate without words. But when it comes to important things like this, there's some miscommunications, there's some misfire. One person hears one thing based on their own shit, the other hears the other thing based on their own shit. And it's very human of them, honestly. Like, as much as it's frustrating, it's actually just very human. And I think that's probably what makes it so frustrating, is it's like, guys, you should be better than this. Like, why? And again, I know why, but it still annoys me. I'm still dramatic about it. Okay, ow. Okay? I just hurt myself. And the thing is, like, the real clincher, right? The, like, moment where I think Crowley feels like he's lost everything is the moment where Aziraphale is, like, clearly like, just come with me. We can, you know, go to heaven together. We can be angels together. And then Crowley's like, you can't leave this bookshop. And Aziraphale says the phrase, which will haunt my nightmares forever. I'm just going to say that, when he says nothing lasts forever. And for Crowley, I think he takes that as we will not last forever. even though I don't think that's how Aziraphale meant it, I think a lot of people have talked online kind of their own thoughts about what he meant by that and kind of like a deeper subtextual meaning. Like, obviously, and someone actually pointed something out that I think is very interesting. I wasn't originally going to talk about this, but I kind of have to now. So apparently there is a picture somewhere on Aziraphale's desk that someone has noticed of a cottage in South Downs. I don't know how they figured out it was specifically in South Downs. I don't know if they saw the Seven Sisters mountain or cliffside or what exactly like made them realize it was South Downs, but it is a cottage. It is apparently in South Downs. It is on his desk. And so people think maybe he had already purchased it at some point. And so for him, Crowley saying you can't leave the bookshop, Aziraphale's like, well, I already got this house, so like I was planning to leave eventually. Like, I'm not going to stay here forever, not when we can have this thing together. I feel like maybe somewhere, I don't know, you could probably stitch that all together if you wanted to. And the thing is, like, we know from the book that Crowley is very hopeful. He always has hope. He's an eternal optimist. And yet, I don't know. I almost wonder if that's still true in the show, because it feels like that moment where, and I guess maybe you can say he does, because like obviously the kiss is like his last ditch effort, his Hail Mary, to forgive the pun. You know, it's his like, I have nothing else, I've got to do something to like shake him up. And we'll get there, don't you worry. So we see Aziraphale say like nothing lasts forever, and Crowley's like, okay, like that's it, you know, this is hopeless, there is no getting around this. Puts on his glasses and says good luck. And I feel like for Aziraphale, he really felt like until that moment he was like, wait a second, I think he thought he was making some good points. So when Crowley puts on his glasses, which is very like, I am, you know, putting down the mask, I am hiding behind this so that you cannot see my emotions anymore, because I had them off before. You could see the emotions and the feeling and like something deeper there. And he's like, nope, cutting it off, demon walls up, we're done here, put on the shades, no more. And I think for Aziraphale, you do kind of see in his face, it's like he's very upset by this, because he's like, wait, what the fuck just happened? So there's a line early on in the season, I think it's in episode 1, where they're talking about, they both say exactly, and Crowley goes, what does your exactly mean exactly? I feel like your exactly and my exactly are two different exactlies. And I feel like that encapsulates this entire conversation, because again, they're saying the same thing, but they're saying it in just slightly different ways so that neither one is hearing that they're saying the same thing. And so neither one is hearing that they both want the same thing. And so you end up with this issue where, you know, like, they could just have it. We could have had it all, Adele. We could have had it all. But no, you can't just talk normally to each other. After Nina and Maggie just told you you don't talk to each other, you continue not to talk to each other properly. Oh God. And again, it's very human of them, I get it, but it's also very frustrating. And that's kind of the moment where Aziraphale's like, wait, what do you, good luck? What the fuck is that supposed to mean? What do you mean good luck? Why are you walking away from me? What the fuck? Like, you always come with me. You always eventually see it my way and come with me. What is happening here? And that's true. I feel like for a lot of times, you know, Crowley does come around and, you know, realizes, okay, we got to make this work together because we work better as a team than we do apart. Like, he knows that by now. Aziraphale knows that by now. But this was kind of like going to heaven is like, nope, we're drawing the line. This is a line in the sand that I will not cross. And there aren't many for Crowley, but this is the one. And I kind of can't blame him. And honestly, what's funny is like, up until, I don't know, a week ago or like 5 minutes ago, that was a line in the sand for Aziraphale too. Like, he knew. I have to assume he knew that Crowley was never going to take that offer. And if he did think so, again, there must have been some kind of manipulation there, because he had to have known that, like, that was never going to happen. Because for Crowley, it's like, it's one thing to say, we have to stay here and fight. We can't just run away together. You know, we have to do the right thing. That's one thing. It's quite another thing to be like, hey, let's go to heaven and see what happens there. Like, that was never gonna happen. The only way I could see that happening, and someone actually made this into like a comic, which I loved. Someone's like, Crowley goes to heaven just so he can be a smartass and like annoy the shit out of people. I'd watch that. I would watch that so hard. Like, just a Good Omens heavenly style version of The Office or Parks and Rec, where Crowley is just constantly annoying the shit out of people. I think that would be hilarious. So then, of course, you know, Aziraphale tries to get Crowley to come back. Crowley says, or he says to Crowley, I don't think you understand what I'm offering you here. And Crowley's like, no, I understand exactly what you're offering. And I'm like, do you though? I have to wonder, do you really? You think you know, but it's very clear that like what you think you know and what he thinks he knows clearly do not match up anywhere. So like, I have to wonder, do you really know though? And then of course, you know, Crowley says the line, which I think is equally biting, and it's probably meant to be, where he says, I know a lot more about this than you do, which kind of feels like very shady and cutting. And like, I do feel like it's meant to. I feel like that's like his I'm very hurt moment, so I am going to cut you back, basically. And that shows very clearly on Aziraphale's face. And then we get the other like big heartbreaking line, which is when Crowley says, you hear that? There's no nightingales. So like, it's a very devastating line. And then we have the moment, okay? This is the moment to end all moments. This is the thing that has lived in my brain rent-free for 3 months now, 4 months now, whenever I watch the end of it. And it's the reason that it's hard for me to watch the end of season 2 at this point. And maybe once we have season 3 and we've got a resolution, I'll be able to watch it better and not be so upset about it. But for right now, it's really upsetting, I have to say. This is the moment where Crowley says, you idiot, we could have been an us. And then he closes the space between them, grabs Aziraphale by the lapels of his coat, very similar to the scene in season 1 when they're in St. Barrel's, where he shoves him up against the wall. But this time he pulls Aziraphale into him and kisses him. And this is like, oh, this is the moment. It's devastating. It's beautiful. There's a fucking heavenly choir playing over them. Like, this is the thing that I cannot stop thinking about. This isn't just like, yes, this is, like I said, it's his last-ditch effort. It is his Hail Mary play. You know, this is, I need to do something to shake him up into seeing, like, this is where you belong. This is where you are meant to be. Do not leave. Do not do this. It is not a good idea. And we see, of course, that it almost nearly works. Like, there's so many moments after this that Aziraphale very clearly second guesses and hesitates, and he's like not sure and really knows this is like the worst thing he could possibly do. And it's interesting because, like, you know, the kiss happens, there's the heavenly choir, which again makes me absolutely feral to think about. Like, it just, every time I think about the heavenly choir playing over their kiss, I'm just like, like, I need to scream into the forest. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It does something to me. I don't know. My little gay lesbian brain, what do you want from me? You know, maybe I'd be normal about this if I had a love life of my own, but I don't. So here we are. Lucky for you, I guess. Oh, slowly losing my mind. I told you, I said, you know, hey, maybe this won't be a breakdown for real, but haha, joke's on me. So, of course, you know, during the kiss, we see, it's interesting because it was also revealed that originally it was supposed to be this very, like, complex 360 kind of camera move, as, like, they are the center of their own universe and everything else is moving around them. But they decided at the last minute, because of their performance, that they weren't going to do that move. I would be interested to have seen what that would have looked like, but I do like how they ended up doing it. I think it's very powerful. I think it says what it needs to. I also think it probably would have been harder to kind of get the specific nuances to this if that had been the case, because if everything had been flying around, it would have been kind of disorienting, and we probably wouldn't have gotten the moment of like being able to tell that Aziraphale kind of has to go on his tiptoes a little bit, and he clutches into Crowley's back a little bit, and he's like trying to keep him there and not let it end. All these little things that I don't think would have been as obvious before, but now you can see that, like, if you had done the 360 move, it wouldn't have been as obvious, it wouldn't have been as easy to see. But because they did this kind of simpler, you can see things a little more clearly, and it's a lot more impactful and a lot more devastating, obviously. It kind of allows us to get a better view into exactly what's happening here. You just saw it in the context of like everything's moving around them. You probably would just see it as like Crowley is doing this thing that's very desperate and also very human. And I think there is something to discuss about that aspect as well. The like very human aspect of what he's doing, of like trying to make Aziraphale see the light and see sense with something as human as a kiss. I think that's very powerful. And I think obviously they do human things all the time. They eat, Crowley sleeps. You know, I've talked about all of these things. They drink together. These little touches that are very like human-like, and I think that is kind of the most human thing they've ever done. Obviously they don't need to kiss to say I love you, but it is very like, it's a very human way to do so, and people across cultures and, you know, time and all of this have kissed as like a way to say hello, I care about you, I love you, whatever. And then of course, you know, when they do finally pull away, Aziraphale is crying, he's trying to catch his breath, and he has the look on his face that, of course, you know, like I said, Rob Wilkins described as, you know, he's shocked that it happened at all, but he also, the look on his face is meant to convey, do that again, please. And again, that's another moment where, how would this season have gone if he had done it again? Again, you know, I didn't realize until watching it, I didn't notice until recently that Aziraphale tries to mouth, comes very close to saying I love you. Like he opens his mouth, you can see it on his lips very, very clearly. And then he stops himself and says, I forgive you instead, which is like, there's a lot of different speculation as to why he said that, what he meant by that. It seems to be something he says quite a bit. You know, I've thought about this in kind of other scenes and like other contexts of like, why is this what he said? Why was that the response? Why was it I forgive you? That's, I feel like the thing is like, he says that to Crowley no less than 4 times. One of the times he says it is when Crowley is talking about how they should kind of leave and go off together. The first time he says that when they're in the bandstand, and Crowley says, I'll never be forgiven, that's what I am. And then again he says it when Crowley tells him they can run away together, and I don't think that time Crowley says anything. He's kind of like, you know what, screw it, I'm leaving. And then he says it a couple times in season 2. In specific, the time that comes to mind is during the Job scene when he says he wants to kill Job's children, and he's like, may you be forgiven, and Crowley's like, the fuck, dude, like, no, that's not gonna happen. And also, God told me to do this, so like, if anything, I don't think she cares. Like, she's the one who gave me this job. I think what makes this particular scene so contentious, and especially the kiss, is I think a lot of people kind of are like, why now? Why this? Why did it have to happen this way? It's very, very clear that these two love each other. It is very, very clear without them ever having to say it. I've talked about how, you know, the symbol of devotion. I've talked about how, you know, Crowley always saving Aziraphale proves how he feels and proves his devotion and like how much he clearly loves him, because he constantly is going out of his way to protect him. He's constantly going out of his way to show how he feels about him. But he's also constantly going out of his way to prove that he's more than just a demon, even though he kind of like clings to this idea because I think it's something he feels he needs, which again is not true in the book as much as it is in the show. But like, it's something he clings to in the show because he feels he needs it, because it's almost like a protective barrier, much like his sunglasses. It's this thing of like, if I can hide behind this, then you don't really know how I feel, and I can like my feelings can be protected. And that is something I've said before, I relate to a little too much as someone who spent a lot of my high school years kind of trying to tamp down my emotions because I was constantly being made fun of for them. I was constantly seen as too emotional and too feminine and too girly and all of these things as like pejoratives. So it was always like, okay, let's tamp down these feelings, stop them. And if I cling to this idea, then maybe I will not be hurt by other people's words or what other people are doing. And I think for Crowley, it's like, if I cling to my demon status, if I cling to this idea that I'm like a big bad bitch who doesn't have, feelings or isn't nice or whatever, then I can't be hurt by anything that heaven is doing. It can't affect me that heaven is constantly trying to destroy these humans that I care so deeply about. And he knows he probably shouldn't, being a demon, but he can't help himself. He's been here so long. And even when he had just come to Earth, like, he cares about them pretty quick, like pretty early on. Like, it's not long into it that we see him caring about these humans, especially with Noah's Ark. We see him caring that all of these people are going to be killed, and God's just like, yeah, that's what she's doing. And he's like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? And so I think for him, clinging to his demonic status is like, if I do that, then maybe it won't hurt so bad. If I cling to this idea that I'm not actually nice, then it won't hurt so bad. But the problem is, he is essentially a good person. I would argue Crowley is probably the nicest person that Aziraphale knows. Way nicer than Heaven. But we know how he feels about Aziraphale, and we know how Aziraphale feels about him. And I would argue that at least as far back as 1941 is the moment where Aziraphale realizes how Crowley feels about him. Because I think maybe he always kind of suspected, but it wasn't until he went out of his way to not only save him from a situation he put himself in, but he saved his books too. It was this extra, it was like going above and beyond, as it were. And that was kind of the moment where Aziraphale's like, oh, okay. So like, this is not just a me thing, this is mutual. And of course, he still can't say it. It's not safe for them to say it. Even though they're quite a bit away from the end of the world, it's still like, ooh, it's not safe yet. We can't say this. Our bosses would be on our asses too much. So we have to this to ourselves. So they never really say the words. And even in the end, when Crowley is trying to make very clear how he feels and how he wants to spend the rest of their lives together, it's still, he can't quite say it. And it is kind of frustrating. And again, I wonder if he had said it, if it would have made a difference at all. This is very clearly a love story. It's been a love story since the beginning. If it's not being said in direct words, it's being said with actions. It's being said with the musical cues. I've said before, every video that I've made, I think I've talked about this in some form or another. I am not by any means a musical expert, so I don't have the wherewithal to know what specifically about the musical cues make it very clear that it's love and romantic. There are just certain things that you hear it and you're like, okay, that is romantic. I love the YouTuber Adam Neely. I wish I had any of his knowledge. I'd love to see his thoughts on a show like this and the musical cues, because he's so knowledgeable about what makes music happy or sad, or romantic. And I've thought about, I've learned a few things, but clearly not enough. So I know that a sad song, it's a minor key, where a happy song is a major key. What makes it romantic specifically? That would be very interesting to know. What is that specific musical moment that makes something feel light and airy and romantic? Because this show has it a lot. You know it when you hear it, even if you don't know why you know it, if that makes sense. I wanted at some point I did want to do a video talking about the story that's you don't see of the musical cues and how they all kind of tell a deeper story, because obviously I think film and television and all of that would be nothing without its musical score. So even if you ignore, The Nightingale sang in Berkeley Square, which is very obviously a World War II era love song, you don't have to search very far to get that information. Even if you ignore that direct reference, you do still know this is a love story. You can still tell that this is a love story. This is, between these two characters. even though it's not directly said, you'd have to really go out of your way not to notice that. So again, like I said, I think throughout this scene, the reason for the kiss is very clearly like it's a desperate act. It's a human act. It's like, I have to do something drastic that is going to make you see like how important this is. And I think it makes sense. It's very beautifully done, like I said. I think it makes perfect sense, even though it is devastating. I think the end, I wish it had gone differently, obviously, but like, it is what it is. Like, there's no getting around how it ended. We can't change that, so just gotta go from there. I do think, I will say, I think from Aziraphale's point of view, he sees it as Crowley is the one who is giving up on them. Because for him, he views it as like, if we're both angels, if we're both in heaven, then not only is this no longer forbidden or taboo per se, it's also something where it's not going to be dangerous. I don't have to constantly feel like I'm looking over my shoulder, not for me, but for what's going to happen for you. We see throughout the series that his biggest concern is always what is hell going to do to Crowley, because he knows he couldn't live without Crowley, and I think Crowley knows he couldn't live without Aziraphale. So season 3 is going to be rough, but it is very much that moment that I think Aziraphale really feels like, if you were an angel with me, I could watch out for you like you have always done for me. I could make sure that you are okay and protected and nothing could happen to you because I'm in charge. So whatever anyone tries to do, they can't, because I'm the boss around here. But yeah, I think that's kind of everything that I wanted to say in this video. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts are about this scene, or even what your thoughts are about anything that I talked about or the coming season. I would love to hear your thoughts. I always love to hear everyone's comments and thoughts. And of course, like this video, subscribe to my channel. And I have recently gotten memberships for my channel, which means you can become a member of the Narcissa DeVille channel, which is really exciting. We do have 2 different tiers that I've created. There is the ineffable tier, which is, I think, $1.99 or just 99 cents, one of the two. And you get super chats and special emoticons that I made myself and had a lot of fun with. Or alternatively, you can become a member of our side, and that you get kind of all the same stuff, but you also get special kind of members only perks and shout outs and things like that. It's kind of like Patreon, but it's YouTube exclusive. I'm very excited about that. So I hope you will join me on the memberships page, and I hope we can just have some fun stuff and make like exclusive members only videos. You can get early access videos. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do, like, I know people do monthly live streams. It's kind of a lot of things that people do, just kind of depending on like what their audience wants. So whatever you guys would want to see, I'm open to it. And I do still have my Patreon, of course. It's patreon.com/NarcissaDeVille. And until next time, stay devilish and see you next Tuesday.